Hey, everybody, welcome to my session converting 3,500 pester tests from V4 to V5 using AI and why V6 will be easy. I actually did poor math because we do have 3,500 plus, but AI only converted 80%. And then Andreas Jordan converted the rest of them. It was very manual and painful. But what's really cool about AI is that by taking the 80% off of our plate, it really freed us up to actually get the work done and perform a successful migration after 5 years. Many thanks to our sponsors, Chocolatey, Jane Street, Ironman Software, Knowledge Factory, and Synergy. Without them, we wouldn't be here today, so I really appreciate it. My name is Chrissy LeMaire. I'm a Microsoft MVP and GitHub star, and I'm also a Manning author. I recently released AI for Everyday IT with my best friend Brandon. In it, it's almost like AI for the office as well. Tells you how to work through documents and email and things like that. We released it in July, and we really tried to make it as future-proof as possible. What's really cool for the PowerShell community is that, you know, how books come in like parts of three, part one, part two, and part three. Part three is all DevOps. So if that's something that you're interested in, I actually have 3 free to give away. You can message me on LinkedIn and I'll do that. So I also have a master's in systems engineering, and I'm currently a senior tools engineer in Brussels and The Hague. And what I really loved about this is on LinkedIn, I had AI toolmaker. And whenever the job came up, somebody was like, oh, I know a tools person. And that's how I did it. And the toolmaker came from Jeff Hicks and Don Jones's book. So I really like that. And I'm not really anywhere anymore, but whenever I am somewhere, it's Fun Bucket on Blue Sky and LinkedIn sometimes. So DBA Tools and Pester, we have had a long relationship with Pester, going on about 9 years now. June Blender, in 2016, she submitted the very first Pester test, which ensured that every command included complete help docs. And I love that. And about 6 months later, Rob Sewell came in and built the entire foundation for the DBA Tools testing architecture, which is really awesome. Um, he and I were actually watching Andre Common at PS CompEU, and Andre was talking about AppVeyor, and I couldn't believe that it was possible for Pester and DBA tools to connect to a live SQL Server instance. And Rob went home and set it all up. And then from there, from 2016 until 2019, all of these people worked really hard together. And we made it one of the milestones of DBA Tools 1.0 that every single command had a test associated with it. And so that's why we have such a huge suite, because we have so many commands and so many tests with. And I will say, Andreas Jordan, he didn't join until 2021, but his contributions are so significant. I did want to include him in this list. So for the migration, we went 1.0 in 2019, and then almost a year later in May, Pester went V5, and we talked about it. We hemmed and hawed because it's so, with all of these tests, it's nearly impossible. But it's really cool. Whenever I was researching the repo for this, Claude suggested, or Claude told me, that 25% of the commits between 2020 and 2023 were actually test related, and they were improving. So that's really awesome. And a lot of that is Andreas Jordan. And then in October of 2024, I started working more with AI, and I started playing around with this agentic AI called Aider CLI. And before, I would go to Chat GPT, and then it had all this text, and I'd heard so much about automation and AI, and I didn't really understand how it could work until I started working with this agentic AI, CLI, and the API, but it was extremely expensive. But while I was messing with that, Simone Bizzuto actually set up the V5 infrastructure for us, where it would detect if it's a V5 test or not. And so we kind of started messing around with that. But because the CLI plus the API is so expensive, didn't really do too much work with it until actually I was talking to Andre Common again in Brussels. And he told me that he was using Claude Code, and you basically just pay instead of an unlimited amount. And I was up to $600. Well, it was like $600 over 2 months. But with Claude Code, you can pay 20, 100, or 200. So I got a $200 a month subscription, and with that, migrated the entire suite. And again, Claude Code is another agentic shell. So when I talk about agentic, I know a lot of us work with wrappers, and so I wanted to clarify the difference between a wrapper shell or a wrapper module and an agentic shell. So with agentic, it comes with all of these things built in, right? It's basically a toolbox. So it comes with a prompting engine. So it'll have like, I'm an architect, ask me a question, etc. And then it also manages the files, including context management. So if you're working with an agentic CLI, if you say, hey, fix the test for get DBA database, it'll not only fix the test, but it'll go and see what is get DBA database, what's the code there, what is it doing, and then it'll make it work together. So it pulls that in, and it manages your memory and workflow orchestration between all of the agents. So with the wrapper, I love PS OpenAI, but with that, you would have to build your own toolbox. You would have to build your prompt templates. You'd have to build the file IO logic. You'd have to do all of the memory. And whenever you ask it a question, it's not going to be aware of the repo that you're in. You're just going to get very basic back and forth. So I do want to talk to you all about agentic shells because we're all PowerShell people, and this was very, very interesting to me. It's like, what does it even look like? So I wanted to include what it actually looks like. Just comes up with Aider, like I talked about before. It's API only, which can get extremely expensive. It's written in Python, and this is essentially what it looks like. So you have Aider dash dash message. You say refactor this test file, and then you send the file, and it will edit it and then write it back to disk. Claude Code, this is the one that I use extensively. I go back and forth. I've only done the $200 max 1 month. That's all that I really needed. Right now I'm on the 100 max, but I did just downgrade to the $20 Pro because I don't foresee myself using it. I'm not just going to throw away money. But whenever you do hit your limits, because there are limits with the 200 max, it was just magical and there were barely any limits. But you can fail back to an API until your limits reset. So that's really cool. And Claude Code, like most of them, was written in TypeScript. And this is what it looks like. So you send dash P, and it's pretty much the same as Aider. But wouldn't it be nice if they all had like the same, just dash prompt? Well, what I found with all of them except for Aider is that if you pipe it in whenever you have very, very long instructions, it actually performs better. So whenever I wrote my wrapper module around Claude Code, I actually had it pipe in to Claude instead of passing that dash P. OpenAI codecs, they are pretty popular. It really seems like there's uh, the top two are Claude and OpenAI. This one's written in Rust. It's beautiful. It's fast. It works with your $20 plus and then the $200 Pro. And like Claude, it can default back to the API while you wait for your usage limits to reset. I don't use the OpenAI codecs. When I am coding, especially whenever I'm refactoring, I want the best model possible, and I see distinct differences in the quality between Sonnet and OpenAI. So I don't use this one very much, but it was interesting to research. And this is what it looks like instead of dash P or dash dash message. It uses exec, and you can pass the file. Gemini is API only, and which is expensive, but what's awesome about it is a lot of people, when they run out of Claude Code usage or codecs, they will use Gemini as a backup because you get 1,000 free calls a day. And I've been using them all day as I've been testing the module that I'm working with. And this one was written in Python. This one looks a little bit different. You can't really specify prompt. It's positional parameters, and you add it in with the @ sign. Recently, I was really excited to see this. Copilot released a GitHub Copilot CLI. I think that it was a re-release. There's a whole bunch more features now, and this is by far the most affordable one with the $10 Pro and the $39 Pro Plus, which I didn't know till I researched. This gives you premium requests, which isn't exactly the API, but it's API-ish because you can set it to use Sonnet and things like that. And this one actually doesn't even allow you yet to pass in the file. You just have to make sure that your prompt covers exactly the file that you want modified. If you're wondering about the safety, kind of like set execution policy, each of these do have it. I was tickled to see that Gemini's overriding safety parameter was YOLO. And Claude, this really shows their personalities. Claude is very formal, and it's dangerously skip permissions. And I think that Copilot really resonates the most with me with just like allow all tools. It's kind of verbose. So as you're seeing this, you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, I see how I can take those tools. If it actually works, then I can just wrap that in something that I'm familiar with, like PowerShell. And that's exactly what I did. Within DBA Tools, I actually had a module. And in that module, I created update dash pester test, and it was very raw, but it totally worked. And this is exactly what I typed out in August whenever I was just slamming through all of the updates. So I just piped in the test file and then it would go through. Now, what would it do? So I'd pipe in that test file and then I would send it context. I would send it a very detailed prompt. So the prompt file path, this one's dynamic. And so with each of these, I needed to say modify this file for this command name using these parameters. And so with that, the dynamic one, it did have a different parameter for it, the prompt file path. But if you have things that are read only, like the DBA tool style, for every single one, it's not going to change. So I just send that as the context. And then also with the migration as well. And with those, it's really incredible. Oh, give me 1 second. With those, it's really incredible because they ended up being so much larger than I thought that they would be. It really filled up all the memory, and this really became a lot about memory management. Also, with Aider and with some APIs, with context files, you can actually cache them and make it a lot cheaper. But with Claude and things like that, it manages it all for you, which is another part of that agentic CLI. So let's talk about context, baby. The context is the memory, and this is really what makes these CLIs very powerful. And the context is really what made it possible to do this migration. Because whenever I am giving it the files to edit, like it's really good to know things like all of the files, like, oh, I'm in this repository. I have all of these test files. This is how it's laid out. These are the things that I can grab. It's just like whenever we are programming, we go and we search for that context. And AI is very similar as well. I don't know if y'all know Salt and Pepper. It was back in the 90s. So this is with long interactive sessions, you can really fill up your context. You've probably heard a lot about hallucinations. And what you'll find is that a lot of times, like the quality, man, it started out so good. And then over time, it just doesn't program as well. And what you'll also find is whenever you start using agentic CLIs at first, you're like, man, it's really awesome. And then you add a whole bunch of MCPs. You probably heard of those. And that fills up your context as well. So just over time, that quality starts to degrade. And what I love about the way that the update pester files, or the update pester test does it, is that every single time the quality is 100, because every single time I start up an entirely new session. So the first command is going to have as much quality as the 700th command. And Claude Code actually just added this slash context, and it shows you kind of what's going on. Now the math is kind of funky, the free space versus the tokens. It's an interesting visualization, but in general, whenever it says 200,000 tokens, I just never believe it. Maybe it does have 200,000 tokens, but it's not something that I can ever use. So again, knowing how to manage your context is very important. I wasn't supposed to put this one in. So when I have this prompt that I wrote, right? You remember the dynamic prompt that I wrote, and then I have the pester migration rules, and then I have the DBA tool style. Each of these things adds to that base context. So it starts out at like 30% use or 60% use, and I am adding to it. And you might say, Chrissy, that's only 4,220 out of 200,000. Who cares? Exactly. So why should I care? But weirdly enough, what we found was that the max file size that we could actually migrate without complications was only 19 kilobytes, which is about 400 or so lines of code. So the base context is 4,220. The quality threshold, the max that we could send over, is an additional 4,000 tokens, and that gives you only a max content of 8,270. So I don't exactly understand how all of this works, but I do know that this was my experience, and anything above the 19 kilobytes, Andreas Jordan had to actually take care of manually. So yeah, I mean, I want to go back to that context management is migration success. So we can process these complete test files. We're not doing it in baby bites. And what was awesome was that it actually applied the 47 migration rules consistently. It enforced DBA tool standards. And again, it scaled to 700 plus files with no quality degradation, because we did manage the context very well. So with that said, let's go ahead and start the demo. All right. So this is Pester v4 versus or migrating to Pester v5. I put this in a Jupyter notebook because it's very pretty. But I will say that it's just not perfect. With Claude Code, for example, it's a node executable that's wrapped in a PowerShell script. And then I am trying to wrap that. And whenever I did it, everything was raw, and everything worked. But whenever you start doing these demos and you have all of this, there's probably some special word for it. Whenever you have all this complexity, it started not to work. So, what I will do is I'll show you what the demo would be, but I'm not going to run anything because there's like a 50-50 chance that it's not going to work specifically with the notebook. So since it's coming from my repo and not the gallery, I'm going to manually import the module, and then I'm going to set it to Claude Code as the default tool. I do support a whole bunch of tools. I actually, if you go to github.com/potato quality/AI tools, I have this module available. I published very long time ago, just a placeholder, and I was really hoping that I could have published this and then you all would have had it. But I didn't get that perfect, start process with running these. So you can go to my repo, and then sometime later down the line, you can get the AI tools. And what this is going to do is just wrap all of the popular agentic CLIs and just make it very PowerShell accessible. So we're going to set Claude Code. And then what I found in the Jupyter notebooks is that if you do start process, it works a lot better and a lot faster. So you're going to see a lot of those. So what I'm doing is I'm just going here, and here's the changes to the DBA Tools repository so that we could see those changes. And the first thing you're probably wondering, Chrissy, what's in the prompt? What's in the migration? What's in the style? Let's go ahead and open those and check it out. So this is the AI Tools module. The first thing that I started with was the prompt. So you could see here, I just do some find and replaces with file path, with command name. It needed to know the parameters. And this was created with the help of AI. It knows that it needs like capital migrate with a whole bunch of bolds and all of that. And it worked out well. So I don't tend to write these from scratch. What I'll do is I'll go to the Pester migration documentation, and then I'll also talk to Andreas and Simone, and then they give me their feedback. I just paste it into Claude, and then it gives me the information back. So the next one is going to be the migration. And you'll notice that at first, what did I do? I just said convert PowerShell, convert this Pester v4 to Pester v5. And in retrospect, I feel foolish. It turns out that you really, really need to be explicit. It has a vague idea of what it's supposed to do. But whenever you want something that's very detailed, then you're going to want to give it explicit instructions. And what's very impressive about this to me is, first of all, we had to work very hard to come up with these standards, which is really nice because it forces the team to actually think about it, and then everything is standardized. But I was very surprised at how long this is. And that is something that's cool about the 200K context, is that it does take a lot of the instructions very, very well. And another thing is that including code and examples is very, very important. It really, really loves that. If I had issues where it wasn't doing it, because that's all that this is. Just like with Git, how you go back and forth, and whenever you're first learning it and you have like 500 commits, it's very similar with the prompts. I would take it, I would add the instructions, I would run it against 20 files, I would see what's not working well, what needs to be very explicit, and then I would add it to this file. So you could see all of the changes that we're making. It's just so much. The variable scoping, that one's really tough. So I go through and it just keeps on going. And this was also very interesting. I just couldn't get it to follow along until Claude was like, "We'll put a migration checklist at the bottom to reinforce." And I did, and it was beautiful. Check this out. This is me actually running it in the console, because it works in the console. And it works with this beautiful output too, with the PS custom object. Weirdly, if I captured it, if I did like results equal, then it introduced problems. If anybody knows the solution to that, I'm very happy to hear it. But you can see here that it goes through that little checklist. And this one for Claude Code was a very, very beautiful migration. And then we went through, and what I noticed was that, sorry, let me scroll up here. What I noticed was that it was migrating it very well, but it was doing it in the style that it wanted to. As a SQL Server project, we don't use single quotes extensively because that's a reserved character in SQL. And so we do things like use double quotes. And so those are the types of things that we had wanted to that we had wanted to include. Right here, I put module instead of DBA tools because I was trying to make this available to everyone, which it will be. But yeah, you'll be able to run this against your own Pester v4 and soon enough Pester v6. Or sorry, V5 to V6. So you could just see these are all of our style requirements that we really dug into a few years ago and then codified it. And this is what's really awesome is taking all of this and writing it down, and then you never really have to worry about it again. So let's see. We're going to look at invoke a DBA shrink. This is one of our old tests, and whenever I would look at it, it was just so ugly. I didn't even like it. It was like, especially this part, like the bottom part. I love our integration tests, but this is a classic test that we would have to migrate. And from here, let's see, we looked at it there. Um, while this was running, so it takes about 50 seconds to run, and maybe I will go for it. Let's just run it and see what happens. So it opened up this because I wanted to show you all. This is actually, that was the wrong one. I needed to update my demo. I don't love this new context bar. So with the update pester test as it runs, let me go see if it is currently running. Yeah, there we go. We have to pass 50 seconds. The update pester test, this is where I pipe it in, and then I could do first and skip and limit. And this allowed me to run like batches of 20. And from that, do the lessons learned and take the instructions that I needed to and put it and constantly upgrade the prompt and style and migration, which it seems very surprising that AI can be so manual. But the great thing is that once you have this framework established, it's so easy to do it again, just like with PowerShell. So we have the context file path, the max file size. That's way too high, the 500, it should be about 19 or 20. And then specifying the model, and then it goes through. I have support for Aider, Gemini, GitHub Copilot, and the Codex. Let me see if there's anything exciting about this. This isn't the actual one. It was the one that I wrote for the public. The actual one was very messy, but it got the job done. No, there's nothing exciting about this. Let's go back here and see. Oh my God, awesome. It worked. This is probably the only one that's going to work though. So it executed that, and let's take a look at this. So you could see that it had this already looks really, really good. This has the requires at the top like we wanted. It has the parameters. It has the unit test and the way that we want to name it. It's very pretty. This was important because I wanted to enjoy looking at our test files. And you can go through it as we see this. There's a lot of work being done, right? It even does this where it makes the hash tables really nice, which is something that was important to us. And this is probably V5 compatible. But I want you to note how much the changes are, because we'll look at other less capable models and CLIs. So this was really nice. I'm glad that it did that. So the thing that Claude excelled at was structural refactoring, the before all and after all, the parameter test refactoring, the where object conversions. I like things to be pretty. I don't like those. The brackets, the hash table alignment, the comment preservation. What it wasn't good at, again, was large files. Sometimes the instructions that were included and maybe even repeated, sometimes it would miss it. So that's why it's important to have somebody go through and look at it manually. And the variable scoping fixes, that just never worked. And Andreas had to end up addressing a lot of those. And whenever I talked to him today, he brought up the 80-20 thing, which I thought was very interesting. He said, I would say that Claude migrated about 80% automatically, 10% was classic, just manual, just like little fixes. And then the other 10% was really hard work. And another 80/20 within the AI realm that I find interesting is there's a company called Rue that makes a Visual Studio Code extension, and they say that who actually are the models and AI writes about writes all of their code, but they throw out 80% and they keep that 20%. But even though they're keeping such a small amount, they're moving faster than ever. So that's really interesting. So, this is, I hope that you're seeing the bigger picture that the reason that upgrading to V6 is going to be easy is because I just have to update a single file. And, just go through that. We already have all of the infrastructure created. And whenever I do it, it's going to look the exact same. I'm just going to take all those files and type them through. So with Gemini, um, I what I ended up doing was opening this. I was very surprised. It actually performed a lot better than I expected. Um, so this is the Gemini conversion of one of the commands. But something that was interesting was whenever it was doing this, I had a whole entire file of a whole bunch of escapes. And that just doesn't happen with Claude Code, but I would rather work with Gemini and modify a file that has been converted by Gemini than to do it manually. But again, if I had if I had my wish, it would be to use Claude Code because it is just superior in the way that it's known for it. There's a lot of benchmarks out there, and Claude Code is always at the top of the refactoring because refactoring is really challenging for AI because they have to have a lot of context. And Gemini actually offers 1 million tokens of context, but it's just not as good of a programmer as Claude. So that's why I don't use it very often. So here I was going to do all of this and then execute it. Copilot, again, I'm really excited about this because I think in the future I'm going to use maybe 3 CLIs to get everything done because Copilot is affordable. Claude Code is exceptional, and then Gemini, it fills in all of those gaps. So this is what I have if you are looking to use Copilot. But what's really interesting is first, I don't like GPT-5 as a model for coding at all. Some people have a lot of success with using like think deeply or think long or something like that. I don't have to mess with any of those. I don't have to tweak anything with Claude. It just gets the job done. But if we go and we look at the Copilot GPT-5 conversion, I mean, it just barely did anything. And this was my experience working with GPT-5 in every capacity. If I'm using it for Rue Code, the Visual Studio, the extension that I use to do the vibe coding, if I use GPT-5, it just wasn't good enough. So this was shocking to me that it did so very little. I mean, this just looks like it hasn't been migrated at all. And interestingly enough, GitHub does actually allow you to pass in a model. And they allow Sonnet, which is my favorite one. But look at this. Why is Sonnet such a capable model? Why didn't it convert this yet? And I think that the answer is I don't know. You can have a really, really good model and you can have poor instructions. Maybe the instructions need to be improved. Or you can have a really, really good model, but they do something called quanting. So they take it and they make it less resource intensive, and that makes it not as smart as well. It'll get you by. It'll look like the same. And actually, Anthropic does this too. Sometimes, if there's too much of a load, it's been said that larger AI companies will quant their models temporarily. So that's what I'm guessing is as this Copilot is being worked through, that maybe the prompts aren't ideal yet, or maybe there's quanting. But what I do know is that there is a distinct quality difference between using Sonnet in Copilot, using Sonnet in Rue Code, and using Sonnet in Claude Code. I think that's actually all of the ones that I was going to show. Yeah, just like this one looks, it just looks so good. It has everything that we want. Go back to the demo. And what's great about learning all of this is that now I have a skill set that is repeatable and can be used for so many other things. You can not just go from one version to another as far as the test frameworks go, but you can also go from one framework to another. You can do the API upgrades. You can do linting and style fixes. We actually did that. I used Claude Code to go through. I updated the documentation to not only say why, sorry, to not only say how, like here, you use, this SQL credential, but I made it put in why would a DBA want to do this? That had very extensive instructions as well. Like I wanted it to be about this long and things like that. It's always a bit more complicated, but it's still very fun. And then it pays off because now our documentation is standardized. The other thing is internationalization sweeps and then also dependency migrations. And this is something that I'm going to be using for some of my older modules that use PS OpenAI. A lot of things have changed since then. And so I'm just going to smash those two things together and fix all of my dependencies.